Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdog's Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner of Me episode, I have a pair of, or maybe a couple of very bizarre stories, folks. We have Cthulhu in the desert, and we have another accounts of skinwalkers being witnessed by various people, folks. Let's get into the first article titled, Massive Amorphous and Tentacled Entity Encountered by Brothers in the Southern Arizona Desert, and hear about what could actually be an encounter with Cthulhu. Let's read on and find out. During a camping trip in southern Arizona, two brothers reported an encounter with an immense, shapeless being that seemed to move in lurching motions across the desert before passing directly over them. What makes this account stand out is not just the size or appearance of the entity, but the witness description of physical distortion in the surrounding space, along with the neurological and emotional effects both men experienced. Let's read on and hear their full account now, folks, and find out exactly what they, saw. A few years ago, I got a call from my brother in Arizona asking if I wanted to come out for a visit. He had just received a substantial work bonus and wanted to use part of it on a brotherly trip, some hiking, some decent Mexican food, and a break from routine. I had a few vacation days saved, so I agreed. The trip started normally enough. He showed me around Phoenix, Tampa, and Chandler, and over the next 2 days, we also visited Sedona and a few other parts of the state. I was set to leave on the third day when he suggested we spend my final night doing something outdoors since I would be returning to cold, wet weather back home. It sounded like a good idea. We found a place to camp in southern Arizona, not far from the border and near an area where we had hiked the day before. It was an open desert, flat in every direction, with enough room to spread out and enjoy the isolation. We parked his truck about 1.5 miles from where we set up camp, close enough to reach if needed, but far enough away to preserve the feeling of actually being out there. The evening was quiet. We talked, ate leftovers we had saved from restaurants, and just relaxed. There was nobody else around that we could see. The nearest road was roughly 2 miles away. It was the kind of desert silence that feels peaceful until something breaks it. At about 10 o'clock p.m., just after dinner, we both noticed something to the north, maybe 1/2 mile from camp. At first, it looked like a low mound in the desert, but it was moving, not smoothly, but in slow, steady lurches, as if each motion required effort. Its color matched the sand, yet it clearly was not sand. Even at that distance, the surface looked fuzzy in a way that was deeply unpleasant to stare at. I remember wanting to rub my eyes. When I looked at my brother, he was doing exactly that. For some reason, fear and fascination kept us in place. We did not retreat, even as the thing got closer and closer. Once it was only a few yards away, the scale of it finally hit me. It was enormous. The flatness of the desert may have exaggerated its size, but sitting there beneath it, looking up, it felt massive beyond reason. My brother and I have discussed it many times since, and every time we try to describe it, we end up reaching for different analogies. We usually settle on something like a huge dry washcloth. Another comparison I used was a hideously blossoming flower unfurling in irregular, ugly folds. There was no obvious head, no face, no eyes, no antenna, no sensory organs I could identify, just a huge shifting body. The best way I can explain its surface is this. Imagine a ball of light brown clay pulled outward in all directions, then covered all over with tiny pins, thousands of them, then make those pins vibrate and give the clay itself a faint, buzzing, breathing motion. That is about as close as I can come to describing how it looked while idling. That sounds truly bizarre, folks, and gives you the idea that this is some eldritch thing from beyond, isn't it, folks? Could have been some sort of bioship, or maybe a tulpa. Maybe this thing was some sort of thought form conjured up by someone or something, folks, and these men witnessed it. But let's read on before I discuss any other ideas about it. Okay? As it approached, I felt more than fear. I felt sick in a way that did not resemble nausea. It was closer to delirium, as though my brain was having trouble processing what I was seeing. Looking back, I think my mind simply could not make sense of the thing. Then, one of its parts, I hesitate to call them tentacles or appendages because neither word feels right, drifted past me. As it moved by, I felt the space around me shift. It was as if the air itself had been pulled aside, brushed away, or subtracted. I became acutely aware of the space I occupied and of something being displaced around me. That was more frightening than the creature's appearance. I would have to say, folks, because it sounds like this entity, there was more to it than what the men were observing. Like, maybe part of it existed in another dimension or as pure energy, folks. And this is what the man actually felt moving through the area he was in. Either way, it's an idea. But let's read on first and discuss anything about this story at a later point. A moment later, I heard my brother make a sound, then suppress it. I turned and saw a much larger section of the entity pass over him. By then, it was directly above us. I expected to see some sort of underside, maybe a mouth or teeth, or some visible structure that would explain what I was dealing with. Instead, there was only more of the same pulsing, buzzing, prickly flesh. Because it had not attacked, I had the sudden thought that maybe it could not sense us if we stayed still. I turned toward my brother and mouthed, "Don't move." He did not answer, but I could tell he had already made the same choice. We disagree somewhat on how long it took to pass over us, but we both place it somewhere between 20 and 45 seconds. To me, it felt much longer. I was hyper-aware of every second. My brother seems to think the experience altered his sense of time altogether. After it passed, I did not immediately turn around. I waited several minutes before even looking at my brother. He was breathing in a deliberate rhythm, clearly trying to calm himself down. Oddly, I felt almost physically relaxed. I was terrified, yes, but also numb, in a strange way, as though my mind had gone past panic and sailed into a blunt acceptance. When we finally turned to look, there was nothing there. The desert was flat and empty again. The truck remained visible in the distance. The sand showed signs of disturbance, as though something extremely large had rolled, crawled, and swept across it all at once. But there was no slime, no droppings, no hard evidence that would satisfy anyone. We stayed the rest of the night. We spoke only when necessary. Neither of us turned on the radio. I had earphones, but never touched them. After witnessing something like that, normal distractions felt meaningless. We sat there in silence for hours. The next morning, we packed up, walked back to the truck, and drove to his house. We had breakfast near the airport before I flew home. We did not seriously discuss what happened until almost a year later. We both needed time. It was not like seeing a dangerous animal or an accident or any other shocking but ordinary event. This felt unreal, but like in a dreamlike way. It felt as though something existed alongside the natural world that did not fit within any category I knew, and yet moved through that world with total ease. I still didn't know what we saw, but I do know that it will probably be the last time I ever visit Arizona. Gee, how insane, folks. What did they encounter? As I said, I basically call this thing Cthulhu because it feels kind of like a Cthulhu or, cosmic, horror type of entity, folks. You get that feeling. But these guys, they weren't driven insane. And Cthulhu is a myth from a, fictional story and stuff like that. So you get the idea. But it still kind of fits it, doesn't it? Either way, let's move on to the next story, which is titled Arizona and New Mexico Skinwalker Reports, Terrifying Roadside Encounters, Reservation Pursuits, and a Strange Navajo Correspondence. And read how more of these witnesses have seen these skinwalkers, folks, and see exactly where these stories go. Over the years, I have received a number of disturbing submissions connected to alleged skinwalker activity in Arizona and New Mexico, particularly in and around Navajo lands, remote highways, desert rest areas, and isolated campgrounds. Whether these experiences point to witchcraft, misidentification, regional folklore, manifesting through fear, or something far stranger, the recurring details are difficult to ignore. Let's read on and hear exactly where these stories go. Let's get into the witness reports now. 1. Route 66 outside Albuquerque, New Mexico, 1967 or 1968. One witness recalled a family trip from California to Arkansas when her father stopped at a rest area off Route 66 near Albuquerque to sleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, he jolted awake in terror without knowing why. Looking out into the dark desert, he noticed a man approaching from a distance. At first, nothing seemed extraordinary until the figure drew closer. The man appeared to wear an animal hide draped over his shoulders, but the truly unnerving detail was this. His feet did not appear to touch the ground. As he passed the family car, he looked directly at the witness's father. The man's stare reportedly triggered an immediate full-body fear response. He started the car at once and fled the area. The witness later said the family heard that a gunman came into the same rest area later that night and shot multiple people. I have not independently confirmed that part of the recollection, but the sight itself remained so vivid that the family never again stopped overnight in New Mexico. Now, the next story is Three Pulls area outside Mesa, Arizona. Another witness described camping with native friends roughly 20 miles outside the valley near a place they called Three Pulls, considered sacred ground by the river. The witness was warned from the start, do not wander off alone and be especially cautious around 3 a.m. when spiritual activity was said to peak. Around 2 a.m., the group reportedly heard drumming. By 3 a.m., a strong wet dog odor filled the campsite. The witness was told this could signify either an extremely malevolent entity or a skinwalker presence. As the fire died down, animal-shaped shadows became visible beyond the camp. At first light, the group decided to leave. As they pulled out, the witness looked back and saw what he described as a Rottweiler-like creature upright on two legs, around 5 feet tall, with bright orange eyes moving directly toward the center of the abandoned camp. It then ran after them before vanishing into the brush. The same trip became even stranger. At a second camp, an older man with hair obscuring his face behaved erratically. Later, while the witness and a friend were walking to get supplies, a car approached and the same man offered them a ride. They refused. He allegedly grabbed the witness by the arm and pulled him toward the vehicle before speeding away when the friend intervened. Near dawn, the same man reportedly reappeared only 10 feet away, asking for help back at his camp. When passing trucks entered the area, he abruptly turned and sprinted after them, displaying speed and stamina the witness found impossible for a man of his parent age. That night, the group established a salt barrier, and although further sounds were heard, there were no more direct visual encounters. Well, good for them, folks, but terrifying. And from the description, he really does sound like a classic description of a skinwalker, except for the erratic behavior, folks. Usually, in those kinds of accounts where you basically actually talk to one of these entities, they give you more of a feeling dread than anything else, rather than acting like it's some insane lunatic. So that stands out with that case, folks. But this is only this part of the story. Let's read on, because there's a third account we want to get through. The third story so far, folks, is titled Navajo Reservation near Holbrook, Arizona. A witness who spent summers on the Navajo Reservation with his grandmother described a terrifying pursuit that occurred when he was 14. He had driven a worker home several miles out into the valley, accompanied by his younger brother, a dog, and the worker riding on the truck bed. After dropping the man off, the boys began to drive back at dusk. Something moved in the brush beside the road. At first, the witness assumed it was one of the many sheep roaming the area. He continued on, only to be overtaken by a sudden and overwhelming feeling of dread. Looking into the rearview mirror, he saw what he described as an unnaturally tall, thin, fur-covered figure running behind the truck. It was not loping like a normal person, and it was gaining on them. His younger brother began crying. The dog erupted in aggressive barking. The witness pushed the truck faster over the washboard dirt road, but the figure seemed to close the gap. At one point, his brother shouted that the thing was coming up on the driver's side. The chase ended only when another vehicle appeared, coming from the opposite direction around a bend. At that instant, whatever had gone pursuing them was gone. When they reached home and told their grandmother what had happened, she was not shocked. Instead, she connected the event to traditional stories of black magic, witches, and Yi Naldadashishi. The witness said he would not drive at night on the reservation again until he was 21. How very strange, folks. So, could it have been a skinwalker? Or maybe an encounter with basically, well, a dogman? Because the Yi Naldadalushi is sort of a basically animal type of creature, folks. So it is associated, well, with Navajo lore, I think, and Native American lore in general. Either way, it is described as a half-man, half-animal creature. At least maybe like an animal creature, folks. Let's just say that. Either way, very strange. And much like with the first account, with basically this Cthulhu-esque tentacled horror, folks, we have no real idea about any of this, only that these witnesses are seeing it. I mentioned earlier with basically the tentacled horror entity that the two brothers saw, that perhaps it was a tulpa. Maybe someone had been dreaming something, or maybe a lot of people were basically believing in something so much that it became real, and these two witnesses out in the desert saw it. Remember, could this entity have also been maybe related to skinwalker folklore, folks? Probably not, but maybe somehow all the energy in the Arizona desert and New Mexico coalesced, and this is what was witnessed. And sometimes people witness it as phenomena similar to basically, well, this skinwalker phenomena as well. Either way, I'm just guessing here, folks. Either way, both stories were truly interesting. But now we're at the end, so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read comics, they're bad for you. You can use the YouTube link down below in the descriptions or the chat to go subscribe to me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure at the part of the bell that give you all future notifications. And please, share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video. So be sure to come back again then. Until next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.